$41 million. That's the number that Dr. George Barna identified in terms of the number of Christians who could vote that are planning not to vote. That represents a choice by Christians not to have an influence in the election. If you just think about the swing states, say like Wisconsin or whatever, oftentimes those swing states in the last election were determined by 60,000 votes or less. 60,000. You've got 41 million Christians, born again, self-identified Christians who are planning to opt out of their civic duty. Western society has fallen into a secular, atheistic abyss that it needs to return to God. It needs to understand what it means to be human again. America, along with the modern West, has lost her soul, and Christians have an obligation. They are duty-bound to step in and participate in a government by the people and for the people. If the book of Romans has anything to say about government, it says to submit to your governing authorities in Romans chapter 13, verse 1. What that means in a government by the people and for the people is that citizens must participate. They must step in to perform their civic duty because you and I are part of the government. And the most basic of civic duties is to vote. Now, whether or not you think your vote's going to count if you're in New York or California, it doesn't matter. The reality is that your vote has implications not just at the federal level, but the state and local level. We have a ballot proposition called Proposal Number 1 in New York State, which has been used all across the country in different states to modify state constitutions to enshrine abortion as a fundamental human right. We are, as a society, no longer concerned about protecting ourselves, or say nothing of protecting the weak and vulnerable of society. And it's our job as Christians to be a moral anchor, to communicate to the world what it means to be human under God through any and all means, including voting. So in New York State, we have a ballot proposition. It's called Proposal Number 1. You have to flip your ballot over to see it, okay? Ballot Proposal Number 1 basically says that they're going to create a protected class, specifically a civil right, and modifying the state constitution for abortion. Also, it talks about creating new categories for civil protected classes, including sexual orientation and gender identity. But the majority of this talks about pregnancy, protecting against unequal treatment based on reproductive health care and autonomy, which is pro-abortion Democrat code for abortion. What it means is they're going to justify through the Constitution, they're going to enshrine and systematize, not abortion, but pro-abortion bigotry against pro-life expression. They're going to outlaw public pro-life expression. This is a movement, okay? And it's not about abortion per se. It's not even about people who are pro-life per se. It's about a war of ideology. It's the atheist secular ideology that cannot countenance anybody or any belief system that runs counter to it, because it has everything to do with control and power. And power, ultimately, the ultimate power is the ability to control who lives and who dies. Voting no on Proposal Number 1, if you flip the ballot, is absolutely important, but you're not going to be able to do that if you opt out of voting. To these 41 million Christians who are opting or choosing not to vote, reconsider. Not just because I have a personal opinion about whether you should vote or not, or about who you should vote for. You should reconsider because you by God's sovereign decree, has been placed in a form of government by the people and for the people. Now, a concern that we have that if Proposition 1 gets passed by the voters, it would outlaw all public pro-life expression, including, a pastor preaching a pro-life message or a message against abortion. It would outlaw physicians who refuse to participate in abortion. That would sanction them, potentially put pregnancy centers further at risk for refusing to refer or provide for abortions. There's all sorts of implications here that we need to be concerned about. This is the kind of battle that we're fighting right now, and I know it makes people feel uncomfortable when I say things like this, some people anyway. But Solzhenitsyn was in Russia, and he studied the Russian Revolution that was fueled by this intense atheistic secular Marxism, which we see now manifesting itself and raising its ugly, evil head in America. And he said, our 5 continents right now in this world are caught in a whirlwind. And this whirlwind he's describing was defined by Dostoevsky, also from Russia, as the demon of evil. But it is during trials such as these that the highest gifts of the human spirit are manifested. If we perish and lose this world, the fault will be ours alone. Vote. Proposal number 1 essentially vests the government with parental rights that essentially trump the rights of a parent when it comes to interacting with their children around gender identity. Systematizes the abuse of women by allowing boys and men to participate in women's sports. These kinds of things are insidious evils which enshrine in law the rejection of not just common sense, but the reality of what it means to be human, male and female. This is the Equal Rights Amendment. People might have heard it termed Equal Rights Amendment. It is the opposite of the Equal Rights Amendment. And so if you want to know what pro-abortion Democrats are really thinking or intending, you just take the words they use and take the opposite. They engage in what's called political transference. So when they say Equal Rights Amendment, they mean giving superhuman rights to some people and making second-class citizens out of others. So anybody that stands against their political ideology, they create second-class citizens out of them and then use the law to shut them down and destroy their activity. So that's what's going on right now with proposal number 1. It has everything to do with restructuring morality and framing that in the New York State Constitution. The least we can do as citizens, Christians, citizens, is communicate the truths about what it means to be human by voting for administrations or people that hold to the protection of all human beings, born and preborn, and understand the role of government to protect humanity. God is the one who established human government. He did that so that we wouldn't shed each other's blood and that there would be some accountability put in place to do that. And when you've got government entities and individuals, elected officials who vest themselves with the power to decide which persons qualify for protection under the law and which ones do not, then they are essentially violating the purpose of government and should be laughed out of office and possibly even thrown in jail. We're in a tough spot in America right now, but I would encourage those 41 million born-again Christians to express their beliefs about the nature of humanity. The easiest way to do it is to express your vote. Express yourself through your vote. Talk to your friends and your family and your neighbors and your coworkers about proposal number 1, ballot initiative proposal number 1. It sounds so nice, Equal Rights Amendment, but again, it has nothing to do with equal rights. It has everything to do with enshrining superhuman rights to certain groups or types of people to shut down any opposition or traditional Judeo-Christian thoughts or beliefs around what it means to be human. We are standing at a knife's edge, and it's not just America. We're sitting here 1 year after Hamas attacks in Israel. Shortly after the original attacks occurred, I said, well, Antifa, pro-abortion Antifa, transgender Antifa, BLM, these are all American versions of Hamas. And you know, some people got angry when I said that, but luckily Benjamin Netanyahu came out a couple weeks later and saved my bacon, saying this is not an isolated case. The Hamas attacks represent a global problem, the forces of barbarism versus the forces of civilization. Now, the forces of civilization, as we all know, if you just go back and look at the history of civilization, is based on those who submit to the fact that there is a God who created us. He is our creator, and we must submit to him, and we must repent of this evil, atheism, this secularism, this materialism that we have embraced by rejecting God in pursuit of just pure happiness, which means pursuit of pleasure, physical pleasure. I don't think it's conscionable for a Christian to withdraw. The Bible does not provide for an option for Christians to step away. It provides for different ways that a Christian can respond to persecution. But persecution exists because Christians refuse to change. Christians refuse to change when culture says change. Christians refuse to dance when culture says dance. Christians refuse to cry when culture says cry or mourn. We understand what is true. God is true. We understand that we are made in God's image and therefore must reflect his image, his character, his nature back to him and back to each other. And quite frankly, when we extract God from society, from government, and refuse to vote, we allow proposals like this to get passed, thereby destroying even more lives. Someone has to stand up and speak up on behalf of the weak and vulnerable society, and if Christians won't do it, who will? If Christians don't understand it, who will? If Christians can't explain it, Who will? You think that Trump is going to explain it? No. You think that Vance is going to explain it? No. Do you think that that Harris is going to explain it? Do you think that the Pope Francis has the ability to explain it? Let me just I'm an equal opportunity offender here, okay? These are all political animals. And I hate to say it. I hate to say it that way. And I know that there's people out there that think that Pope Francis is presence of Christ on earth or representative of Christ on earth. But the fact is, he has equated providing a means or a livelihood, a working livelihood to immigrants in America, to the death of preborn boys and girls. He has said you've got to choose between the lesser of two evils, and he refuses to say which is a lesser evil. Failing to provide for a living wage for an immigrant versus failing to protect the lives of preborn boys or girls. That's equivalent. That's how he portrayed this particular election at a federal level in America. Is it really equivalent to say that, oh, here comes an immigrant on his own volition into the United States, legal or otherwise, he got here. Now it's incumbent upon those of us that are here to give that person a living wage. Versus, here's this preborn boy or girl who has no voice, no standing, no power, no money, no leverage, no nothing of his or her own. Unless someone picks up their cause, that preborn boy or girl will die intentionally at the hands of an abortionist. How are they equivalent? How does that even compute? And so we as Christians, born-again Christians, with the Spirit of God in us, have the ability to filter all the things that are coming to us, the good and the evil, and make judgment calls in terms of how people should behave and how, therefore, we should respond. And when we step back, when we refuse to take that responsibility seriously, when we refuse to be the prophetic voice, when we refuse to be that prophetic presence through pregnancy care work or through sidewalk ministry or through whatever you can do in terms of conversations with your friends and family and coworkers, etc., even over Thanksgiving dinner, then we are relegating society and those weak and vulnerable of society to be oppressed and enslaved and killed by the powerful. The reason why we have a constitution and the form of government we have is so that the weak can be protected, is so that we create a level playing field for all humans. That's what's at stake right now. It's not about abortion as a political issue. Make no mistake, abortion is not just another political issue. And if a pastor out there is listening to me saying, oh, it's just another political issue and we shouldn't be involved in politics, well, hear me well. This is the greatest social and systemic injustice the world has ever known. And if the church has nothing to say about it and our faith has nothing to do about it, simply because politicians have picked it up as a talking point for election, then our faith is worthless. If our faith does not speak to the point of the greatest systemic human injustice in the history of mankind, our faith is dead. Faith needs to be demonstrated by our works, good works. There's a reason. Do you know what the context was for the first martyr of the church? The context of the first martyr, Stephen. Why was he martyred? Well, he was actually vying for the protection of widows, right? The weak, the vulnerable, those that widows in that society had nothing of their own, no standing, no material wealth, etc. Someone had to pick up their cause, and then in that case, in that scenario, it was the synagogue, the temple, the religious leadership of the day. And Stephen, being a Jew and being part of the Jewish community, was assigned the responsibility of making sure those widows were taken care of. And so he would stand in front of the Jews, of the leaders of the day, and say, look, you need to do this. Just because a widow confesses Christ as Savior doesn't mean you should kick her out. You're still responsible for her. They were discriminating against these Christian widows. And so there was Stephen standing up on their behalf. And he had a chance, because of that, he had a platform to speak the truth about what the gospel means and about what it means to be human. Jesus Christ demonstrated that all human beings are invaluable because he is God in the flesh. He has and he shed his invaluable blood on our behalf. He spent to purchase back us. So he set a value on us, which was, as human beings, as being invaluable. And so must we. And when we step away, we cheapen the faith that he gives us. We cheapen the grace that he gives us. And so we have a materialistic society that's designed around fulfilling our desires, our passions, our needs, our perceived rights, and the government and those that we elect ought to be doing our bidding. That's not the rule of law. That's the rule of the mob. That's the rule of your stomach. That's the rule of all your appetites. I'm not so sure that Western civilization is going to survive, but if it is going to survive, it has everything to do with buying ourselves more time in an election that could very well be a pivotal moment in determining whether or not America will continue as a rule of law society or masquerade as a democracy under the philosophy of Marxism. I'm speaking to Christians. Step in, don't step away. God has placed you sovereignly in a government by the people and for the people, and you are part of that people.